Well, it has been a while since we brought you an update on the turkey release program taking place here in Alberta, and no one better qualified to talk about that subject than my next guest. A real pleasure to welcome Jim Clarke. He is a member of the Alberta Wildlife Federation and has been intimately involved in the turkey program along with the Alberta Conservation Association. Jim, thanks so much for taking time.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
Well, let's start off with what's happening on the ground. I guess over the last number of weeks, there's been some activity. Bring us up to speed.
Yeah, so far this year, we have trapped 158 birds that have passed their vet checks, meaning been certified to be free of any disease, and they've been released into Alberta. There is currently 25 sitting in the holding pen in BC, pending their final vet check, which should be in the next day or two. And then they'll be released as well into Alberta, which will bring our total this year to 183 birds.
So that's total over the last 2 years.
No, that's just this year. On top of that, the previous year, it was their first year trapping and getting going. ACA was learning and getting their wings, so to speak, on how to trap birds. And they actually trapped 177 last year. So all told, if those last birds check their vet checks, which every bird has done that already, we will be at a total of 360 birds for the 2 years.
So that's well, I mean that's certainly a big step in the right direction. You've mentioned a couple times now quarantine. We are looking at a situation of avian flu. What impact has that had on this program?
Well, so far, thankfully, all the birds have tested negative for all the pathogens that they're being tested by the veterinary lab of BC. So that's a good point. What it does is it has hindered us from going to other jurisdictions and possibly getting other birds at this time, just because of the high risk of bringing in avian bird flu. Avian bird flu, yeah. So we want to make sure we don't introduce it to Alberta or more cases of Alberta. So we kind of need to let that run its course in the jurisdictions that we have a future of possibly getting further birds.
So when it comes to selecting sites, Jim, what are you and the ACA looking for? And talk about the cooperation, obviously, that landowners would play in all of this.
So are you talking releases in Alberta sites or the sites we're trapping?
The release sites.
Okay, so they actually have a land manager with ACA, and he's the liaison between the release crew and of course the landowners. So far, all of the landowners have been really, really receptive to having the turkeys on their land. The comments were, I used to see turkeys on my land 20 years ago. I haven't seen them in a long time. It's great to see them back. They're actually quite the ambassadors. They've taken the extra step and provided extra feed for them just for the turkeys, so to get them going.
So that, yeah, I mean, you make a good point. Hadn't thought of that. On the flip side, in BC, obviously, the trap structures have to be erected, and it's my understanding that the majority of turkeys that are taken in British Columbia are actually problem animals,
Yeah,
problem
they're a
birds.
problem for BC, but we'll more than take them. So they're a problem in the fact that they are hanging around towns. They can't be harvested by hunters in BC. So they've become accustomed to humans, and they're doing they're defecating on a lot of property and gardens and stuff like that. So some of the local landowners are very receptive to having, some removed. They don't want them all removed, but they want them thinned out. But there's the flip side of that too. There's a certain certain trapping areas where they really, really love the birds. And actually, they're actually one individual was trying to scare the birds away from the traps. So yeah, so they are a bird that is passionate by a lot of people.
And none more than the hunting community here in Alberta, at least down the road, you're hoping for an opportunity to increase hunting opportunities. But I mean, obviously, that's going to take. I think it's a 10-year program, isn't it?
Well, the trapping in BC is a 10-year program. The target is to get up to 200 birds per year from BC, and they're moving the locations around. Last year they did the Invermere and Radium area. This year they focused more around Cranbrook and Kimberley. But at the bequest of some of the landowners in the Invermere, they actually went back there and trapped some more birds because the birds infilled after we took the birds out last year. So they were still having some problems with birds in there. So we went back in there and trapped for this year's releases.
Any signs or indication that the turkeys that were released in Alberta having any issues with predators?
Not per se, because you can't follow every single bird. But I did participate along with a bunch of the members that actually have donated to the project. They all have an opportunity to come out and attend in a release. And we attended a release just a couple weeks ago with some landowners that had a release on their site last year. So we're kind of building the numbers in that area. And I had a nice chat with the landowners, and they were A, very receptive to having the turkeys there, and B, they were almost protective. Like the guy was commenting that he had a hen nesting in his garden and he left her alone just in her area to raise her poults, and they saw turkeys around all summer. So it's a very good sign. On top of that, that release that I actually took part of, they actually put on the first backpack trackers on two hens. And that they're going to do a couple more yet this year. They're actually going to go back to some of the release sites and actually trap a couple of hens and actually do follow-up studies on where they're moving to, where they've, relocated to. I will say that the birds that we released, 2 weeks ago, they're very close to where we released. I've seen the initial GPS data, and they haven't wandered too far, which is a good sign.
You mentioned it just in your last comment that obviously the club members to the Alberta Wildlife Federation have come up big time in terms of helping to fund this project.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. They've helped out last year and this year. This year, we've actually had a new donator come online. It's the Calgary chapter of the Safari Club International, Calgary Fish and Game, Lethbridge Fish and Game, Northeast Fish and Game Zone 5, Okotoks Fish and Game, Onaway Fish and Game, Sarcee Fish and Game, the Southern Alberta Fish and Game Society Zone 1, and the Wildwood Rod and Gun Club. And all told, they donated $36,000, $36,500 to the project. And if you can kind of get a picture of where they're from, they're all over the province. They're not just in the area the turkeys are in. So there's value in the project for sure to the clubs.
And is it a year-to-year kind of funding model, or is there enough dollars in the kitty to see this program through the next 9 years?
Well, I'm not privy to ACA's budget, but I know they're very appreciative to us helping out, putting towards the project, and it's something that's happening on the ground. You can see right away project that's coming to fruition. So it's not something that's being studied for another 10 years or more. It's actually we're putting birds out there, and you see them right away.
Yeah, maybe let's talk about that for just a second. I mean, you look at programs like the fish stocking program, for example, and in some ways this is kind of like that, but it's a much longer time period. You're hoping to sort of establish a base number so that these birds can reproduce, and then a decade down the road that becomes a huntable population, I guess is the best way to kind of describe it, eh?
Yeah, well, and also it can become a seed stock. So after the total 10 years program in BC runs its course, can we go back to the areas that we've released birds and actually use them to trap from that location and move them out, leapfrog them out, move them 10, 20, 30 kilometers, and then have them backfill into the appropriate habitat in between. And that's kind of the model that Ontario went through years and years ago. They did that. They stocked an area, then they went back, 5, 10 years later, they trapped from there and they started to outfill. And I mean, Ontario just has a fantastic, healthy turkey population, both for observing and hunting right now.
All right, Jim, we'll leave it there for the time being. Congratulations on another successful season to both you and your team, and of course the Alberta Conservation Association for its ongoing work on this project. We will no doubt check in with you again soon to see how things are moving along.
Yeah, and I got to say thanks to ACA too. They've been a great partner to work with.